All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for part 2 of the Fundamentals for Real Estate Investor series. I'm Leah Kolich, an investment counselor here at RealWealth Network, and I am really excited to get into this part 2. I got great feedback from everybody about part 1. Everybody really enjoyed that foundation, so we're going to build upon that today, and I'm really looking forward to it. So we'll get right in. A couple of housekeeping items before I get to the content about our upcoming webinar content. I just recorded a new market highlight series yesterday with our Cleveland team. Cleveland is an awesome market for cash flow. They've got some amazing deals right now. So be sure and check that out. That video series will go live on the investor portal this weekend. So you'll see the newsletter come out Saturday morning with a link to access that series. So we hope that you'll check that out and see what it is that we like about the Cleveland market. Upcoming live webinars. Next Thursday, we're going to be talking with our team in Indianapolis in a live format. So you get the chance to ask questions in real time and hear about another super solid cash flow market. So we hope that you'll join us for the ND webinar as well. The link to register for that should go out next week. So be on the lookout. If you're ever having trouble finding how to register for these live events, reach out to one of us. You can always email RealWealth. You can always email your investment counselor, and we can get you connected with the link if you're wanting to attend these webinars live, but really kind of unsure on how to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out if you haven't been able to join us live. And our disclaimer. So the strategies we're going to talk about today are not necessarily appropriate for everyone. There might be some other options that are better for you in your specific situation that you definitely want to consider. So engage your personal experts, talk with your accountant, your tax advisor, your attorney to discuss your specific situation. To be clear, I am none of these things. I am just another investor sharing my personal experiences and some of my thoughts on these processes. As always, past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Real estate purchases are, of course, subject to investment risks, including the loss of amount invested. So while I have made every effort to make sure I'm bringing you accurate information, the possibility of errors and/or updates exists. So trust what I say, but verify for yourself and certainly make sure that these strategies are appropriate for you. All right, a little bit about myself. As I mentioned, I'm an investment counselor here at RealWealth. I am also a real estate investor. I'm married to an active duty Army officer, and we've had the amazing privilege to spend time living in Asia, Europe, and most recently South America. We actually moved back from Bogota, Colombia to Boston, Massachusetts just last month. So really excited to be back in America for a little bit. Our investing strategy began about 10 years ago, kind of on accident, purchasing a primary residence and then turning it into a rental for the long term. And then eventually we had the opportunity to kind of look back on our retirement plan and realize that subscribing to the traditional means of maxing out 401ks and IRAs meant that we could retire, but that we could retire at 59 and a half when we could access those funds. So we really sought out to develop a strategy that would allow us to have a little more control over our timeline and the freedom to dedicate as much capital to that strategy as possible and really determine our own timeline. So we've been investing in real estate ever since. We came to RealWealth Network as investors just like you, looking for ways to grow our portfolio and expand into new models, long distance. So we've purchased a lot of our properties from overseas, from out of state, but we connect with these great teams and have been able to continue to grow despite our geography. So that's a little bit of a background about me. Really looking forward to getting into more today. I wanted to quickly recap for those of you who didn't watch the first part of this series. We kind of laid that foundation for real estate and the 5 different revenue streams of real estate. So we talked about cash flow and how that is probably the most focused on income source of real estate, but we know that it's not exclusive. It's not the only source of funds. So we know that cash flow grows over time as rental values go up, and we know that we can manipulate that cash flow depending on how we choose to finance a property. Principal pay down, speaking of financing a property, this is one of the great benefits of real estate. It allows us to, we can use leverage to buy a property. A bank will allow us to put only 20% down on a home, and yet we can enjoy all the benefits and the returns of it. So principal pay down, allow a tenant to pay down that mortgage for you. Of course, the great tax benefits, You get depreciation, you get to take a lot of great deductions, and then we even touched on that 1031 exchange strategy, which allows you to defer capital gains tax when you keep that money reinvested in real estate. The hedge against inflation, we remember that as the value of the dollar decreases, we know that the asset values go up. We also know that the impact of inflation on the debt, that mortgage that we carry, works in our favor. That debt is eroding over time along with the value of the dollar. So real estate provides us an awesome hedge against inflation. And then of course, the cherry on top, appreciation. Property values are going up over time, and we get to realize that gain when we sell or tap into the equity of that property. So if you want to get more in depth on these 5 different ways, be sure you check out the first part of this fundamentals class. I'd love to have all of you guys kind of lay that foundation first before we get into today's content. So we're really going to be building upon this fundamental when we're talking about different strategies. I want you to constantly be thinking about all of these different revenue sources because they will obviously inform your strategy. So turning your real estate investing goals into action can feel pretty overwhelming. It's sometimes hard to know where to start and to know how to begin making progress. So we've laid out the 7 steps that we think every investor should follow to get going in your investing journey. The first one is to clarify your goals, define your current situation, so understand your reality, where you're at, and how that might inform your strategy. We want to discover our purchasing power, so we want to be realistic about the capital that we're working with and what kind of return it can give us. Then we want to put together a financial strategy. Understand, does it make the most sense for us to buy in cash? Does it make the most sense to buy using a loan? What does my financial strategy look like? That leads us to our acquisition strategy. So we got to get serious about determining how we plan to acquire these homes and what types of properties we plan to acquire. And once we've kind of led that, we start refining our buy box. So we get really familiar with exactly the type of property that we're looking for, the type of market that we're looking for, and who it is that we want to have manage that property for us for the long term. And then hopefully that leads us to the final step, step number 7, diligent execution. So we actually do want this to result in some action. Okay, so let's talk about step number 1. It's really important to get serious about why you're doing this. You know, I mentioned in our story, it was really realizing, hey, you know, we're halfway through our military career. We're to the point where, you know, in another 10 years, we could draw on a military pension, and we want to be able to decide where we live. We don't want to have to go chase a job and spend more time away from our family and friends. So this idea of having freedom, this idea of having some flexibility suddenly became really important to us. And it was when we got serious about setting that goal to be job optional at the end of my spouse's military career that we really started seeing a path ahead. So I've got some questions here to kind of get you thinking about your why. Why is it that you want to invest in real estate? Are you young? Do you see the value of this and you recognize that you have lots of time on your hands, so you want to start leveraging the value of time? Are you close to retirement and recognizing that, hey, I don't have cash sources, I don't have a revenue stream that can give me the kind of retirement that I am looking for, so I need to put a plan together quick to get some good cash flow? Did you recently inherit a large sum of money that you want to get reinvested, and maybe you're a little nervous about the stock market right now, so it's all about just getting a good return and getting that money working for you? Do you aspire to just own a few doors as a measure of diversification? Or are you looking to scale your portfolio into something much larger? Maybe you have this grand idea of eventually, you know, quitting your W-2 job and focusing on real estate full time. Understanding kind of what that end goal is helps you take the appropriate step first, so you don't have to backtrack. Are you wanting to become job optional, and when? Are you looking just for a way to reduce your tax liability? So maybe you really enjoy your W-2 job. You're not looking to replace you know, your 9-to-5, but you're looking for ways to maximize some of the tax advantages of investing in real estate. So it's a good idea to keep some of these ideas in mind and just be honest with yourself. What is my why? Why is it that I'm wanting to invest in real estate? Having a clear goal in mind allows you to suddenly see a path towards making that goal a reality. I really think that our brains are far more malleable than we even realize. I believe absolutely in the power of positive thought. I believe in the power of optimism. And I really believe that there is something chemical about verbally expressing what it is that you want. So if you've ever listened to Rich Fettke, our co-CEO, give his beginning of the year broadcast where he talks about goal setting and becoming a focused investor, he always talks about the reticular activating system. And when I first learned about this, man, it's something that I always sort of understood in concept and recognized in concept, but hearing the science behind it really, I think, unlocked something for me. Your reticular activating system is a filter in your brainstem. And at any given time, you are receiving hundreds of different feedback signals. You're receiving everything about your environment and what's critical to you. And that reticular activating system is working as a filter, allowing you to filter out the things that aren't that important and focus on the things that are really important. And so this is something we can use to our advantage with goal setting. I think a perfect example of the reticular activating system in use is the example of, you decide that, hey, I really like this particular model of car, or maybe it's a particular handbag that you're interested in. And once you start kind of researching this car, researching this handbag, suddenly you start seeing it everywhere. Suddenly every other car on the road is that car. And is it that suddenly that car appeared and there's a coincidence and suddenly everybody's wanting the same car or the same handbag that you did? No. What is the difference? You have told your brain what's important to you, and it's now filtering out the excess and allowing you to see what it is that you're interested in. So I've totally experienced this and seen this play out in my real life. My husband and I, when we talk about our next acquisitions or we talk about our future plans, we really spend a lot of time just conversing about it, talking through ideas, just opening up our minds to the possibility of something. And suddenly, when we've kind of calibrated our brains to what it is that we want, suddenly a path towards that appears. And now we're open and we're observant of opportunity that allows us to make our way to that goal. So I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons that I think goal setting is so important, and being very clear and verbal about what it is that you're seeking to do. I love this quote from Earl Nightingale: "People with goals succeed because they know where they're going." Okay, so once we have kind of thought about our goals, it's important to define where we are. So I think this is a little bit of the reality check. You've got to consider capital limitations. So you've got to look at how much money you have available. You want to be realistic. You want to be realistic about your savings, but also your rate of savings. How quickly can I accumulate funds? And do I have earning power to get me to my goal within that reasonable time? And I'll take you through an exercise that can kind of help you solidify that realism as well. Consider your time capital as well. Are you in a really demanding time of work? I mean, I think during COVID right now is a really great example of that. There's a lot of people out there pulling double duty, homeschooling their children full time and working. As we enter the end of the fiscal year, everybody's work seems to ratchet up a little bit. So is work life so demanding that this is just not realistic for right now? Possibly. You also want to consider, if I can save up money at a specific rate, do I have enough time to accumulate the type of savings or cash that I need to reach that cash flow goal before my retirement age? And I think the other thing you want to consider is major life events. These are absolutely going to have an impact on feasibility. Are you anticipating a major career change? Well, changing employment could have some impacts on financing. It could have some impacts on the time capital that we talked about. Are you going to be caring for aging parents in the near future? Are you going to be having a new baby? Are you going to be paying for a child's college education? You name it. Think about these major life events that might be on the horizon and really kind of address how those might impact the timing and the feasibility of everything. So that's the first two: setting our goals and taking kind of a pulse check on where we're at. The third step is to discover our purchasing power. So we're talking, again, feasibility of a financing strategy. Real estate is great, and I think it's extremely powerful. I think that Some people are under the impression that it can be done with no capital. And while there are strategies to utilize other people's capital and leverage through some partnerships, the reality is it takes money. There's got to be some capital involved. So you want to be aware of just how much cash do I need. And I find that it's really hard for the investors that I speak to often to understand what is realistic. I always have people come to me and say, hey, I have a cash flow goal of $10,000 a month or $5,000 a month, but they have no awareness on how realistic is that? How many houses do I have to generate $5,000 or $10,000 a month? So I always suggest walking through this reverse calculation to give you that reality check. So let's say that I am interested in creating $5,000 of cash flow for myself a month. This is my goal. This is my freedom number. Maybe it's what allows me to become job optional. It's a $60,000 a year. So is that realistic? What does that actually look like? So let's walk through a couple scenarios. The first one is a financing scenario. So let's first figure out how much does each one of these homes cost. So we're going to use a very typical RealWealth property. If this home cost $100,000, if you're planning on using financing, you got to put a 20% down payment. So that's $20,000. You're going to have closing costs around $5,000, and then you want to have cash reserves. We recommend about $5,000 for that house. So all in for one house, you need about $30,000. All right, so that one house, how much cash flow does that one house provide me? Well, realistically, that house will rent for $1,000 a month. You'll have $700 of expenses, and so you will net about $300. That's a very conservative amount. All right, so let's do some math here. Follow me with this. So we have a goal of $5,000 a month. We're gonna divide that by the cash flow per door so that we can calculate how many doors I would need to have. So 5,000 divided by 300 is just over 17. So I would need 17 homes to generate those $100,000 homes. I would need 17 of them to generate $5,000 of cash flow a month. Well, how much capital do I need to buy 17 houses? Well, we figured earlier that each home, I need about $30,000 a door. So let's take 17 houses times 30,000. If I wanted to create $5,000 of cash flow today, I would need about $510,000 to invest. So, you know, again, I emphasize the word today because obviously we know there's some time value of money when it comes to real estate. So this is strictly looking at capital that would require to create this cash flow projection today. And for those of you who are following this equation, I went ahead and calculated the annual cash on cash return. So that's figuring how much money am I generating each year relative to how much money I have invested. So to figure that, I took $5,000 times 12 to get the annual return, and that's 60,000 divided by 510, my total capital invested. So my annual cash on cash return when I'm looking at my cash flow is 11.7% in this scenario, which I feel like is pretty good. All right, so does that seem daunting? The idea of owning 17 houses or the idea of saving $510,000? Maybe. Maybe that's a little bit overwhelming to you, or maybe that's totally within the realm of possibility. So let's look at another scenario. Let's look at the cash buy scenario. Say you're not interested in getting loans. I'm going to buy this home outright. So your sales price is $100,000. The closing costs are going to be a little bit less because you don't have to pay all the loan processing fees. Your cash reserves is about the same. So all in to buy this house outright, I need approximately $107,500. All right, how much money does each one of those paid off homes generate for me? Well, from our last presentation, we knew that cash flow increases when we own homes outright. We don't have to pay that mortgage payment. So now each home is cash flowing about $700 a month. Okay, so let's apply that math. $5,000 divided by the cash flow per door, $700, gives me right around 7 houses. So how much capital is required to buy 7 houses outright? We can take 7 houses times 107,500. We need a total amount of almost $753,000 to generate that same amount of cash flow, $5,000 a month. So you can see it took more money to do this, but I hit the same cash flow goal with fewer doors. So maybe you're seeing that and saying, well, hey, 17 doors seemed overwhelming to me. 7 seems more realistic, but man, that's a lot of money. I gotta come up with almost another $200,000 to implement this strategy. And look at that return. I calculated the annual cash on cash return by taking that $60,000 annual income divided by 752, and it gives me a return of 7.9. Right, so my efficiency, dollar for dollar, my money is not working quite as hard in these paid off homes as it is in a leveraged home. All right, so hopefully you found that helpful. I think I want to caveat that a little bit again by reminding you, like, that's today if I wanted to create that. Obviously, we have a time factor that will make that easier or harder, I suppose, depending on your specific situation. We also used a very, average home value and rent to value ratio. So, keep that in mind. There will be some variance there depending on the home that you're specifically looking to acquire. But here's some purchasing power takeaways that I want to be sure that you're thinking about. One, you got to be realistic about how much capital you need to hit your cash flow goal. It's not to discourage you, it's not to deflate you, it's just to put it on the proper context. If you have more capital, you can generate the same amount of cash flow with fewer properties. So you can have efficiency in the number, I guess your time capital. I mean, you have fewer property managers that you have to manage. Homes that are purchased with cash reduce my cash on cash returns. We were looking at an 11% return versus was that a 9%? I can't remember off the top of my head now. But we know our cash on cash return figure is reduced when we buy a property outright. So, and again, remember to consider all 5 ways. So that was kind of a cash flow focused analysis, but we've got to consider that, we have all of these other income streams as well. All right, and we'll get into some additional points on this a little bit later about, the time value and how that can kind of chip away at some of the capital requirements as well.